If you want slightly better performance than your smartphone from this Canon PowerShot V1, then just put the camera in full auto mode and you are ready to go. But if you want to use this camera to its full potential, then this video is for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you the absolute best video settings for the Canon PowerShot V1. Whether you are vlogging, filming B-roll and product shots, or aiming for cinematic visuals, I've got you covered. Let's dive in. First, let's start with vlogging. When you are vlogging, you want a simplicity, reliability, and great autofocus. Here's my recommended settings. For the mode, you need to select aperture priority. So for vlogging, we'll jump into the menu, we'll go into the movie recording size, click on that one and choose 4K 29.97 frames per second. And instead of choosing the light IPB, I prefer to work with IPB. It's not a huge difference, but in IPB setting you get slightly more information. The file sizes are slightly bigger. If you have a smaller SD card, then go for the IPB Lite. It gives you twice the recording time compared to the regular IPB. So we're going to select 4K 29.97 frames per second in regular IPB. But you don't need to worry about the shutter speed because we are using the aperture priority modes. You need to select your aperture to the maximum value you can select. So I'm assuming everybody should be using 16 wide focal length, and in that wide focal length we get 2.8 aperture. So keep the camera in 2.8 aperture and don't worry about the shutter speed. And so you don't need to also worry about if you're going to be in a POL or NTSC video systems according to your region, because the camera will select auto shutter speed and that will avoid the flickering. So it'll make sure that your video, there is no flicker under the artificial lights. Then we'll go to the next tab, sound recording. We're going to turn obviously the sound recording on. Audio settings, built-in microphone, recording mode auto. And trust me, camera does a really good job. Unless you're using the external mic or any kind of wireless mic, I think this microphone is far better than normal scratch microphones you get on other cameras. I'm really impressed by this microphone. And don't forget to use the dead head or the wind muff that comes with the camera. So the wind filter, leave it on auto. So after wind filter, audio noise reduction, leave it enabled. Unless you're going to be using some external or wireless microphone, leave it enabled. Camera does a pretty good job when it comes to noise reduction. Next tab we're going to go into is our ISO speeds and setting. Before I go into ISO and the filter, you're going to leave this on auto, because when you're vlogging, sometimes you are in really bright situation and sometimes you are in darker situation. So instead of turning on or off ND yourself, leave it on auto, and camera does a brilliant job controlling ND filter. So then the ISO setting, for the max ISO, leave it on 6400. As we have said, we are going to be in aperture priority mode, so your ISO is going to be on auto. Select 6400. Don't go for 12800 because then your video is going to be too noisy. So here 6400 as well. Next, go to the colors tab. So here I normally do color edit my videos, so I'm going to leave it in Canon log settings, C-Log 3. And if you're going to be using the C-Log, then turn your video assist on. It will give you the actual graded colors on your screen, so you'll get the better idea how your video will look like after color grading, and plus it helps you in nailing your exposure as well. So I will leave it at on. And color space, choose cinema gamut. I think this color space gives you the most accurate colors, and you get slightly bit more information when it comes to the colors. But if you're not familiar with the color editing, then you can turn this one off and leave it on picture style on auto. So you come out from here, white balance. I normally leave when we log in on auto white balance. So leave it on auto white balance, and then high ISO noise reduction, leave it at standard as well. In image stabilization tab, you're going to turn on image stabilization. Now this is the lens stabilization. Camera does not have a sensor shift stabilization. It only has the lens stabilization. So you turn lens stabilization on. Now here you have two options, enhanced and just the regular one. A regular one is pretty good, so leave it on. Enhanced will crop in too much. There is another option here that if you're going to be vlogging by yourself only and you're not going to be showing anything else in the video, then you can use this stabilization, subject tracking IS. So if you turn this one on, and then you need to select the position. So when you select this IS, image stabilization, when you start the video, you need to tap on yourself or whatever you want to keep in the middle or on the side of the screen. So just let me just bring this thing here, if you can zoom in. So if I position it center and I come out, now I need to tap on it. Once sees it brings it in the middle. So let me show you again. So I go back in the menu, and if I turn this off and come back and turn it on again, you see it brings it in the middle. So if I tap on here, it brings that thing in the middle. So you see that's how it's stabilized. It does crop in a little bit, so keep that in mind. I normally prefer to use the regular stabilization. So you're gonna turn on the regular digital stabilization. So lens stabilization plus the regular digital stabilization will give you the pretty good image. So last thing, you need to make sure you adjust your screen brightness. So go into this wrench menu, and this is a fourth tab. Press on screen brightness and you increase the screen brightness if you're going to be shooting outdoor, because at the default level the screen is very dim out, especially in the direct sunlight. So increase the brightness to 5. I'm going to leave it at 3 for time being. Again, in the wrench menu, you can go in the last tab and custom shooting mode. You register these settings and this will be your default setting whichever custom mode you choose. Like suppose if you're going to choose C1, so whenever you dial to the C1 setting, these settings will be there, so you don't need to go into the menu and change anything. So for me, these are the best settings for vlogging. You get the great image quality, smooth autofocus transitions, and reliable exposure. Next up, let's elevate your product shots and B-roll footage. For these, detail, clarity, and smoothness are the key. So for this, set your camera to the manual mode. So go into the menu, first tab, movie recording size. Click on that one, and you're going to be choosing the regular 4K cropped IPB setting, so 59.94 frames per second. You're going to be using the key lights and stuff, so instead of using 50 frames per second in a poll, you can select NTSC, the system. I can quickly show you where is that. So here you come and you're going to be selecting the video system NTSC, as you're going to be using the video lights, so you don't need to worry about the flickering under the other artificial lights that we use normally in households. So go into the menu, go quickly into the movie record, so choose 4K cropped 59.94. There is no mode where this camera can record a full frame or use the full sensor to record 60 frames per second. The only way to record 60 frames per second in 4K is using the cropped mode. I think it's 1.4 times crop, but that's the only way, because you need to slow down the footage when you're recording B-rolls and the product shots. It gives you a bit more smoother footage. So select this one, and then don't worry about sound because we don't really need that. And the filter, you're gonna turn this one off here, as you're going to be using the lighting, which you can control the exposure. And ISO, you're not going to be using auto ISO, we're going to be using 800 base ISO. Base ISO for this camera in C-Log is 800. To get the maximum dynamic range, we're going to be using in 800 ISO. Come out of this one, and then picture style, we're going to go in C-Log and turn C-Log on. Same thing as I mentioned before, you're going to turn the view assist on, and color space, you're going to choose cinema gamut. After selecting the C-Log 3, we're going to go to the next tab, and this is very important. You need to choose the correct white balance, and to do that you need to go into the white balance and select custom balance. So what you're going to do, you're going to go into the custom white balance, you're going to click it there. You need to go into the photo mode, like turn the switch here, go into the photo mode and take a picture. So when you are in a picture mode, take a picture of a gray card, make sure you're focusing on it. So take a picture. We have taken the picture. Now you need to go back into video mode, and you go into the menu, custom white balance, you click on that, and it will ask you to which image you want to use to do the custom white balance. You're going to press set, and it will say use white balance data from this image for the custom white balance. You're going to click it, and your custom white balance is done. So as you can see, it's pretty neutral. So that's how you're going to select the custom white balance. And I'm again saying this is very important when you're doing the product photography or the B-roll. You need to show the accurate colors. Next, high ISO, we're going to leave it as standard. We're not going to change anything here. You can use zebras. You can turn the zebras on. I normally like to leave it at 65 plus minus 5%, and the level 2 I like to leave it at 95. So turn your zebra pattern 1 and 2 on. It does help you to nail your exposure, but if you're familiar with zebras, that's a great tool that you can use. Vlogging, it's not really necessary because your exposure is controlled by the camera. You're just controlling your aperture. So that's how you're going to select it. Then we're going to come out of here. Now for product photography or B-rolls, we're going to go into the image stabilization, and now you can see that other stabilizations has been turned off. You cannot turn them on. Is because at 60 frames per second, camera is already cropping into the sensor. So the digital stabilization or subject track stabilization is not available. Only IS mode available is the regular lens IS. So you're going to turn that on, especially if you're hand holding the camera. If you're not, if you're using gimbal or sliders, then you need to turn it off, because the cameras or lens stabilization will fight with the gimbal stabilization. So you need to turn this off. Now here, this is a bit tricky in an autofocus section. Normally when I am recording or filming the products, I like to use the manual focus, but the manual focus in a video mode in this camera is available, but to use it, it's very clunky. It's very, very clunky because you cannot customize the lens dial. You cannot customize that. And the back dial, which is this one, you cannot customize this dial. I've digged in deep. I've tried everything, but I was not able to customize this dial or the front dial for manual focus. The only option it gives you, suppose if I'll go in a manual focus now and come out, and if I want to focus on something, I click on that. I have to tap up or down, you see, with this thing. Unless you are on a tripod and you're not hand holding the camera, that's the only way you can do it smoothly. If you're hand holding the camera or your camera is on a slider or a gimbal, that's kind of impossible to do the proper manual focus. So I will just suggest just forget the manual focus. The autofocus on this camera is pretty good. So what you can do for the autofocus settings, you can go into the menu, select autofocus, and for the area, select number 1. Depend what kind of product you are shooting. If it's a very small product, then go for the smaller one. Normally I think the number 1 works quite well. And you're going to enable the autofocus, servo autofocus. You're going to enable it. Next, subject to detect, you're going to click it none here, because you are shooting products, you are recording B-roll. You don't want the camera to be looking for the face. You're going to disable everything, and autofocus speed at 0. It works pretty well. So we're now using the manual autofocus. So these are the best settings. You come out of the menu and you can adjust the f-stops on the camera, on the lens from the front dial. And you need to make sure you get the brightest, you are using the brightest aperture, unless it's a requirement of the shot that you need to get everything in focus. then use lower aperture value. Otherwise, go for the highest aperture available. Now the shutter speed, you can adjust the shutter speed in a manual mode with this dial at the back. So shutter speed, you're going to go with the 180 rule, which is double the number of frames per second. So we are using 60 frames per second. We are filming in 60 frames per second. So it should be 120. The camera doesn't give you an option for 120. I couldn't figure out in the menu how I can increase the shutter speed with a smaller increments. All it's giving me after 100 is giving me 125. So 1 over 125, you're going to select that as it is closest to 120 frames per second. You leave it at there. You leave ISO on 800 and f-stop according to your needs, but I prefer the shallow depth of field whenever I'm shooting the product. So f2.8, the highest aperture available on this camera. So why we decided to shoot in 60 frames per second when recording B-roll or the product shots. The reason behind it, we will be editing this footage on 25p or 30 frames per second timeline, and we will slow down the video. It looks more cinematic, especially when you slow down the videos in B-roll or when you're doing product shots. So this 60 frames per second video will be delivered in 30 frames per second, 25 or 24. So these settings, you can go into the wrench menu and go to the last tab in the wrench menu and use as your custom shooting modes. So register setting, we did C1 for the vlogging settings, and this one we can save it as C2. So these settings will deliver stunning clarity, smooth slow motion, and professional level quality, perfect for showcasing products or capturing detailed B-roll footage. Finally, if cinematic storytelling is your goal, here's how to achieve film-like footage on your PowerShot V1. First thing you need to do, you need to select the manual mode from the mode dial on the top. The first thing you need to be aware of, if you're shooting indoors. If you're shooting outdoors, it doesn't really matter. But if you're shooting indoors and you're going to be using the household lights or something like that, make sure that you adjust your video recording system, video system according to your region. I'm going to leave it on NTSC, assuming that either you're shooting outdoors or you're shooting under the professional video lights. You're going to go into the first menu, first tab. For cinematic videos, we're going to choose 24 frames per second. There is no option for 24 frames per second on this camera, but we have 23.98 frames per second. So select that one. We'll come out from there. Sound recording, it all depends if you're going to be using the external mic, as I mentioned before. If you're going to be using the camera mic, then I suggest, because you're definitely going to be color editing or editing this video, then built-in microphone and turn off the noise reduction. The next tab, so anti-filters, we're going to turn them off. We're going to be nailing our own exposure. So when it comes to the ISO speed, we're going to leave it at 800 to get the best possible dynamic range. We're not going to be using any auto ISO. Picture style, we're going to go in a analog settings, turn C-Log 3 on, view assist on, color space like we've done previously, cinema gamut, we come out of here. White balance. So when I'm shooting these type of videos, I normally use the manual white balance and input the Kelvin values according to my requirement. So that's completely up to you what you want to do. If you want the proper accurate color temperature, then use the custom mode, which is this one, and I showed you in the last section how to do that. Then we're gonna noise reduction. I normally leave it at low when I'm recording the cinematic videos. Here I normally do turn on zebras. Definitely you need to turn that on when you're recording that. And the settings, again, I leave it at 65 and 95. Image stabilization, again, it all depends what you're doing, but normally I leave the image stabilization on and digital IS on as well, unless I'm using a gimbal. If I'm not using gimbal handheld, then this is the best option in my opinion. Here it all depends what you are shooting. If you're going to be shooting people, then you need to go on autofocus whole area and focus mode autofocus. Next tab, people. Or if you're doing mix, in my experience, if you tell the camera what you're shooting, animals or people, it does a better job. Instead, you leaving it on a camera to decide on auto. Eye detection, you can enable it both for animals and for the humans. Okay, then you come out, you go on a main thing, you bring your f-stop according to the scene's requirement. Use as a higher f-stop if possible for the better cinematic looks. You need to blur the background to separate the subject, whatever you're shooting, from the background. So use the higher f-stop value, f2.8 at 17 mm. And then the shutter speed, as I showed you, you can adjust with this dial. So we are filming in 24 frames per second. So we need to bring the shutter speed close to 24 frames per second, double the 24 frames per second. So using 180-degree rule. So 24 plus 24 is 48. There is no 48 available. Closest to 48 is 50. So 50, we're gonna leave the shutter speed at 50, ISO at 800, and f-stop according to your requirements. But I prefer to leave it the highest f-stop available. So again, you can go into the wrench menu, last tab, custom shooting mode, register the setting, and you can register them as your custom mode 3. So you got the vlog settings, then you got the product shot settings, and then you got the cinematic settings, all saved in these custom modes. So whenever you need to shoot these type of videos, you just select C1, C2 or C3 according to whatever you want to shoot. So these cinematic settings provide excellent flexibility for color grading and that beautiful cinematic motion blur and aesthetics. There you have it, the ultimate guide for the best Canon PowerShot settings for vlogging, B-roll product footage, and cinematic storytelling. Now you are fully equipped to create amazing videos. Let me know in the comments which type of videos you are planning to shoot next, and use this camera to its full potential rather than using it like a phone. It's an amazing piece of gear and I'm pretty sure you will love it. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more tips. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.